What's up? Welcome in. Hoge Jahns with you. It is cut down day as we
trade day
record. It is turning into trade day.
Trade day yesterday. No, that's all you got.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
go ahead.
Trade day today.
I just wanted to cut off your open.
Yep. Good job. Mission accomplished. We're going to actually veer in a different direction today, though, because we still wanted to get you an episode this morning, and we will talk about this Dan Feeney trade here briefly. But the dust is going to – look, a lot's going to change here in the next 48 hours. The roster that comes out later today as we record on Tuesday morning is going to be way different 24 hours now on Wednesday after the claims all happen. So we're going to reconvene on Thursday morning and stick to our regular schedule. And as the dust settles there, we'll break it all down for you. Today's episode, we've been planning and definitely want to get this out for you before week one, but we got to dive into the division at some point. We've been talking Bears, and yet there's three other teams in this wide open NFC North. And I think this division is perhaps actually a little underrated in the grand scheme of things and is going to be very, very interesting. So we're gonna break it all down for you here.
I'm interested to see if those we're about to have on this podcast think it's as wide open as we think it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're gonna ask them all who they think is gonna win the North. And I think there is a scenario where each team's beat writer picks their own team.
And that's what we're doing.
Yeah. So, anyway, Alec Lewis, who covers the Vikings, will be here. Matt Schneidman, our friend from the Packers, will be here. And then Colton Pouncy, who covers the Lions, will be here as well. We'll go 1, 2, 3 through the division. But before we jump into all that, Johns, there was a trade last night. Dan Feeney, Sandberg kid from the...
So another local guy, man.
You must love the trade. It's an Adam Johns approved Chicago guy.
I think I still have his phone number because I did a story on him coming out of that draft, whatever year that was.
I think 17. And he
17, okay.
He was IU kid, Indiana, drafted by the Chargers, and spent 4 years there, I believe. Then went to the Jets, and then spent this offseason with the Dolphins. He just signed with the Dolphins in March, and apparently they weren't planning on keeping him, so they trade him for what looks like a 6th-round pick, which is interesting. They gave him $3 million, $2 million signing bonus, so the Bears are going to be on the hook for $1 million here. They give up a 6th-round pick. The Dolphins' offensive line isn't exactly great, and they were willing to get rid of him despite paying him, eating $2 million essentially. That part's not exactly, I don't know what's the right word, reassuring. However, you got if you're the Bears and you're not feeling great about your offensive line and your health right now, you got to find somebody you can pretty much plug and play here in a week and a half. And the thing about Feeney's last 2 stops, Mike LaFleur in New York with the Jets, Shanahan guy. Mike McDaniel in Miami here the last, 5 months or so, 4 months, whatever it's been, also Shanahan guy. So the scheme here, he should be able to come in with Chris Morgan, Luke Getsy, and hit the ground running and potentially be a guy who, if they need him to play week 1, can.
Like your initial reaction is, oh boy, what does this mean for Tevin Jenkins? Because we haven't seen much of him. When the media did see him, he had a walking boot on his right foot. It was his right foot. So we know it's week to week. We know it's serious. So that's like your initial reaction. That Tevin Jenkins injury, like Dan Feeney is here to help make up for it.
I think you and I both had a different reaction.
Yes. Like this is a younger version of Lucas Patrick.
Yes.
Is it not? Like, the Bears haven't put, maybe Tevin Jenkins later today or tomorrow is on IR. I think he can't go on to tomorrow, right?
It'll be tomorrow. Yes. He'll be on the 53 today. But, yes, maybe this means he's going on IR for 4 weeks starting tomorrow.
But Lucas Patrick also hasn't played a whole bunch either. Yeah. For a guy they brought in here last year to be this culture changer from Green Bay, he's barely played. When he has played, he's been bad. So, like, my initial reaction was Tevin Jenkins. Second reaction, this is interesting for Lucas Patrick as well, who hasn't played a lot during camp.
Yeah, maybe Lucas Patrick is one of the cuts today after this trade. It's very interesting. But I keep coming back to, just regardless of who we're talking about specifically here, the fact that this is still an issue is somewhat disappointing. We talked about all this the whole offseason and how Justin Fields needs the help. Now, they did get him a right tackle, and they did get him a really good wide receiver. But that interior of the O-line, and some of it's injury-based, but you knew it could be injury-based. I mean, I remember when they signed Nate Davis, and then it was like, well, Lucas Patrick and Tevin Jenkins, and it's like, well, okay, but those guys have struggled to stay healthy.
Yeah. Well, I've said it on the show. If you're talking about Lucas Patrick and Alex Leatherwood being your potential backups, like, I'm okay with that. But now Alex Leatherwood, he's gone, and the Bears just ate that money. That experiment is over. What was your reaction to that? One of the first cuts, too.
I mean,
I never so many opportunities. Sorry, I keep talking.
Yeah, I never really liked the move to begin with. Anytime a team gives up on a first-round pick that fast, I just feel like the chances of it working out somewhere else is just not very high. But I understood why the Bears took the flyer. It was an expensive flyer. You're eating $4 million here, but they have the money, the cap space. It's not going to hurt them if they were in position to do it. I was just never really that optimistic about it. And I do appreciate that they're willing to cut ties and not, let guys linger just because of the money. Same thing with PJ Walker. Didn't work. See you later. And that's sort of why I'm wondering back to Lucas Patrick, if they're just like at this point, like,
thanks, buddy.
It's just not working. We love your character. We love, your presence on the team. But if you can't play, you can't play.
Yeah. We saw it. I was getting text messages from some friends around the league about that, and there was some shock considering the contract, considering that PJ Walker has had some success. Like, he's made plays in this league, right? Let's not forget the bomb to DJ Moore. Like, he's had some successful moments in the NFL. But my response to, like, all of them was, Bagent was better. It's not just that one drive in Indianapolis, too. Like, we saw it in practices a few weeks ago. Bagent started to outplay them. Play him. Them, if you want to include Nathan Peterman. Although I don't think he really got a chance for the backup. But Bagent was better.
Yeah. And I appreciate when competitions are that obvious to everyone else, and you make an obvious move that makes sense. It's kind of refreshing a little bit. Now, eventually we could probably have a talk, and we probably will, about perhaps the downsides of having a rookie backup. But I think that'll be more for Thursday's show when we break down, the entire roster once the dust settles. Today's show is more about the NFC North, and I think it makes the most sense to start with the defending NFC North champions, the Minnesota Vikings, and Alec Lewis from The Athletic, who covers the Vikings. We talked to him now. All right, well, we will start this with the defending NFC North champions, the Minnesota Vikings, who, I don't know, talk to pretty much anyone in the world. They believe the Vikings will be worse this year just because of basically luck and the lucky season they had. I'm sure, Alec, that's pretty much been your talking point. Or you've been battling through that. I don't know. I like this idea of the competitive rebuild they're doing. There's a lot of interesting things going on with the Vikings. But I guess, what is your reaction to all that and this idea that the Vikings are going to be worse just because?
Well, I think I agree with it in this sense. The record's going to be worse, but I actually think the team could be better. First, because Ed Donatel was fired and they hired Brian Flores to be their defensive coordinator. And if you watched any kind of subset of games last year, the defense was as passive as one could get. They're now going to be the polar opposite of that. And then I think offensively, they've added some pieces in a guy like Jordan Addison, first-round pick, who I think they believe can separate in a way that Adam Thielen could not last year. So I agree that the record, I mean, if they were to get win even close to 13 games, I think people would call it a resounding success. But I would say even if they win 9 games, I think the team in general might be a better team overall.
My guy, Kirk Cousins. So I'm curious, Alec.
Your guy.
My guy. Oh, now he's everybody's guy after the quarterback. So how is he handling his newfound superstardom? In all seriousness, though, but like, what's year 2 of Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell gonna look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right in that he has kind of blown up, and it's I think it's been such a weird thing. Like, there was a day in training camp where his wife was out there with their kids, and like people were coming up to his wife. I was just like, this is pretty silly that like people know her as well as they do to be able to come up to her. But I think Kirk, there's definitely been a different comfort with Kirk this entire training camp, and I think it showed up in a lot of different facets. I mean, I think obviously on the field and just his kind of command of the offense in year 2 with Kevin O'Connell, I think you can see that. But I think he's done some weird stuff. Like there was a mustache Monday that he started, and then he said they turned it into a mustache week. I don't know. One day he wore the jersey 66 to troll the punter who used to wear 6. Like he's done some stuff that for a buddy of his told me, he's like, when Kirk starts doing that and kind of embracing the like goofiness, like he knows he's goofy and kind of like the perception about him. But when he starts doing that, the buddy was like, I think that's when Kirk's most comfortable and most himself. And so I think it should be kind of interesting just to see how that manifests on the field when the lights are bright, when the pressure's on. Does that translate? I think I'm looking forward to watching and analyzing.
A secondary question, like, did you find it, I don't know if unique is the right way to put it, but it's the first year of Kevin O'Connell, and they were okay with their quarterback being, I guess, featured at length and depth. I mean, they did interviews, with Netflix as well. What did you make of all that?
Yeah, well, Kirk made it a point to say, if I'm going to do this, then I want it to be as non-invasive as possible, and I don't want people to know what was going on. Like, just full disclosure, like, I had no idea that was happening in the moment, and some of the other players in the locker room, like Eric Kendricks, I remember saying, like, oh, I didn't even know that was happening. So a lot of the filming was done by, like, NFL films, people wearing NFL films, so you didn't really know what was going on, and I think that was important to Kirk. I think the two things for him was, I don't want it to look like I'm grandstanding to help my image. And I think he also didn't want like the Kevin O'Connell and people to feel like that as well. So I think those were two. And I think he wanted editorial rights on it. I think that was another big thing for him. So yeah, it wasn't a big deal. And I think Kevin, speaking about Kirk, I mean, that's how Kevin's handled Kirk in general. Like, Kevin has been optimistic. He wants to come behind his guys, and I think that's a theme that you've seen from the get-go since he got hired.
That's interesting. Because that kind of confirmed. Justin Fields already turned it down for this season, but the argument we were making after watching that show was like, I didn't think it was that invasive. If you like look at a lot of the stuff's filmed at home and outside the building, and the stuff that's like in game, they're filming anyway for all teams when NFL Films is there. So it's that, I don't know, that's interesting. It kind of confirms what I thought. Let's talk about this offense though, because like, okay, for all the jabs I take at Kirk Cousins, I mean, he can spread the ball around and get it in the right hands of his playmakers. There's no question about that. And Justin Jefferson's still on this team. Jordan Addison, the thinking there of swapping Thielen out for Addison is completely logical and makes a lot of sense from a speed and separation standpoint. Obviously, TJ Hockenson comes over in the middle of last season, and that seemingly really opened up the offense. These guys should be pretty good, right? Where's the weakness?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the interior of the offensive line. Can that group, Garrett Bradbury at center, Ezra Cleveland at left guard, Ed Ingram at right guard, can those three make an improvement from last year? And I think the Vikings are optimistic that can happen, but they're also, I think they have other plans to be able to help that group. And that's why they went out and signed a Josh Oliver at tight end, who is this 270-pound, looks like an edge rusher type, who I think is going to be blocking guys on the edge. And then I think they're going to use fullback CJ Ham a lot, insert him in certain blocks on passing downs. I think he'll play a big role in the run game, but I think I'll start with the interior offensive line, and then it's going to be about running efficiency. I mean, they were the worst team in terms of negative rushes last year, and I think that the staff looked at that and they're like, we can't put Kirk Cousins in 3rd and 8 consistently. We can't force the go ball to Justin Jefferson and rely on that at all times. So improved efficiency in the run game, I think, has been a priority. And how that jives with losing Dalvin Cook, it's like a fascinating thing, but I still think they're optimistic that they can improve their rushing efficiency with scheme and improve blocking.
Beyond their own expertise, where do you see maybe the biggest difference going from Mike Zimmer to Kevin O'Connell? Because for as long as we've been doing this podcast, Adam, it's been Mike Zimmer and then Kevin O'Connell comes in. So, Alec, where have you seen maybe the notable differences or maybe even some similarities between the two?
Yeah, I don't think many similarities. I think the biggest thing is just confidence and comfort just inside the building. Like, I just think from a culture standpoint, I know it's like the most, I don't know, coach cliche thing probably to say culture, but I genuinely believe that the players feel more comfortable and more confident, and it's allowed them to be a little more free. Like, I think about it a lot with the defense this training camp. It's like some of these guys who aren't that proven, like a Josh Metellus. I mean, the amount of confidence these guys have to go play and play fast, I think a lot of that comes from Kevin O'Connell. And then I mentioned how he's worked with Kirk Cousins, but I think that's a big piece. I think he has been just very Kevin has been very intentional with how he talks about Kirk, with how he reviews things with Kirk, with the time they spend together. And I think that's just something wholeheartedly different from what was happening here with Mike Zimmer.
I want to ask real quick about the defense because it obviously wasn't great last year with our old friend Ed Donatel. And couple of interesting things here, because to change schemes so dramatically 2 years in a row never seems like a great thing. But maybe they're going backwards to get back going forwards, because a lot of these players are still the same. However, there's also a lot of really young players here too. I got a lot of respect for Brian Flores. I think it's a great hire. I kind of view this as almost when Vic Fangio got to Chicago with a young defense that wasn't necessarily, anywhere near one of the most talented units in the league, but the coaching kind of got them to be respectful. I mean, what's the expectations here for this defensive unit to just kind of hold down the fort a little bit while the Vikings try to score enough points with their good offense?
Yeah, I'll start with the scheme part that you mentioned. I mean, I think in some way they are going back to more of a Mike Zimmer type, which I think fits like a Danielle Hunter, like a Harrison Smith. I think that scheme probably fits those guys a little better. I think it fits some of their cornerbacks better just to be able to go play man. But the way I think about it is like Wake Martindale last year with the Giants, where it is just maximum chaos. And is it going to work at all times? Like, probably not. I mean, you're playing with fire, and sometimes you're going to be in the fire, I'm sure, with how they put some of these cornerbacks on an island. But I think the way they have viewed it is, we're not with the experience and the talent we have on defense, we're not going to be able to run these exotic schemes where these cornerbacks have to know rules and linebackers have to pass off routes. I think it's let's go just roll it out there and you guys just go play fast and we'll throw some curveballs at quarterbacks, and that's going to be their approach. But I think it all kind of comes down to like Kevin O'Connell wanted his defense to affect the quarterback. And initially Ed Donatel was going to do that with kind of disguise and changing picture after pre-snap, post-snap. Brian Flores, I think it's just going to be like affect the quarterback by throwing the gauntlet at him. And so I think that's what the Vikings will do. And I'm sure at times it will definitely burn some corners that are really, really young.
Alec, thank you so much. Last one for you. We talk at length about Justin Fields, DJ Moore, everything Bears, right? When you look at the Bears, like, what do you see? Like, I'm curious, just, from a division, from someone who covers a division rival, like, what's your viewpoint of the Bears right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm from Alabama originally, so my Justin Fields thing goes back to the college football playoff and the game that, I mean, I think it was one of the most impressive, like, tough performances I've seen. And then another play that seared into my head is I think last year at US Bank Stadium, Justin Fields took off for like 65 yards. I think it might have been called back, but just the dynamic, like, running ability at this level is just crazy. I think overall, they've chosen such a different team building route than what the Vikings have. I mean, Adam, you mentioned earlier the competitive rebuild approach that the Vikings have taken, where they want to win, but they also want to reset things. The Bears have obviously chosen a semi-different route. And so I don't know. I'm really interested to see how it plays out this year and how the team building approaches look down the road when they've kind of hit whatever their crescendo. So I think it's really interesting. I think people here probably are lower on them, but I think they've added some pieces defensively that I'm just looking forward to seeing, and I want to see Justin Fields in a long kind of stretch of play where he could just go do his thing. So I don't know. I have a lot of respect for what he's done as a player, what he did that night in college. It's just seared into my mind.
Have you decided one way or the other who's going to win this division?
I'd probably lean Detroit at the moment. I just think offensively, not just the personnel, but I really think Ben Johnson knows what he's doing as an offensive coordinator. So that's probably where I'd go. But I'd say their defense does scare me a little bit, and then the Packers, we shall see. But I think the Vikings look at the division, and part of the reason they've opted with the competitive rebuild, and I think feel comfortable with it, is they think the division's going to be up for grabs, even if you're not really maximum talent. So we'll see. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, it should be up for grabs, and it'll be fun to follow along. Make sure you're following Alec at Alec_Lewis on Twitter. All of his Vikings coverage up on The Athletic. Good luck out at the Minnesota State Fair. Say hi to Paul Allen for me.
I will. That's who I'm going. That's who I'm going to talk to, which means I'm going to be. I mean, it's at the State Fair with PA. You just have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah, it's just good luck. Craziness.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
See you, man.
Thanks, Alec.
We all have busy lives these days. You can't afford to waste a day stuck on the couch because of a few drinks the night before. Z-Biotics is the answer we've all been looking for. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotics, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it the most. Just remember to drink Z-Biotic before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Every time I have Z-Biotics before drinking, it makes such a difference the next day. Even after drinks the night before, I know I'll be able to move on to the next day's task with no setbacks, like covering the Bears. Give Z-Biotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/Adam to get 15% off your first order when you use Adam at checkout. Z-Biotics is back with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Adam and use the code ADAM at checkout for 15% off. Thank you for Z-Biotics for sponsoring this episode.
Are you struggling to close deals? Cold outreach is wasting the time of both the buyer and the seller at every stage, especially when sellers are using shallow and outdated data. Your organization can overcome these challenges with technology that translates comprehensive, high-quality buyer data into real-time insights. These deeper insights empower sales reps and teams to adopt the habits of top performers, which leads to better outcomes like more pipeline, higher win rates, and larger deals. We call this deep sales, and we've built the first deep sales platform with the next generation of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/Hoge. That's linkedin.com/Hoge. linkedin.com/HOGE for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/Hoge to get started.
All right, from Minneapolis, we go over to Green Bay, and our friend Matt Schneidman joining the podcast once again. What's going on, Matt?
Boys, you know it's football season when I'm on Hoge Jahns. It's time.
It is time.
Let's talk about Jordan Love.
Who? Wait, Aaron Rodgers still isn't here? What?
It would be wrong if we did not ask you the age-old question on this show, but is Jordan Love bad?
I guess the official journalistic answer is we don't know yet, but I certainly saw more good than bad from him by a significant margin in camp. Now, there were definitely some mistakes. The deep ball still needs to get ironed out. That was too inconsistent. Got better as camp went along, but the kid looks the part. You know, the Packers ran 2 triple options in practice the other day with Jordan Love and, you know, fake dives to A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones. And then, you know, Jordan Love goes in motion. I don't even know if it's called in motion. I don't even know how to describe it since the Packers never run triple options around here. But Matt LaFleur has strongly pushed back against the idea that we're finally going to see his true offense without Aaron Rodgers here to have so much influence on it. And then Mark Murphy, God bless his soul, gets up to the podium on the first day of training camp and says, I think this year we're going to see some more of Matt's true offense. Like, just put Mark Murphy in front of a microphone if you want the truth about the Packers. And I think Jordan Love is the right guy to do what Matt LaFleur needs him to do. The Packers don't need him to be spectacular. They just need him to not lose them games. I think they have enough talent around Jordan that if he's slightly above average, they can still contend here in the division.
Now that Aaron Rodgers is gone, Matt, like, what was it like covering the Aaron Rodgers-less Packers for OTAs, training camp, now the preseason too? Like, what's gone? Like, that is a superstar Hall of Famer. Like, how can you encapsulate everything that is now gone from the Packers?
Well, one, with all due respect to Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers is a reporter's dream to cover because he just, I mean, I love McAfee, but I'm not saying like, you know, an hour and a half every Tuesday, you know, watching all that. And every time he makes a comment about COVID, having to be worried about everything he does and says. Not having to do all that all the time is nice, but, you know, in terms of someone who would just sit there and shoot the stuff with you after his Wednesday pressers and, you know, give really insightful answers and be really interesting, doesn't get better than Aaron Rodgers from people, you know, like yourselves that I've talked to around the league. But the biggest change is just like, it's cliche, but like the vibe change. This is a completely different team. And as reporters, as you guys know, we want to cover like the unknown, the intriguing. And the past couple of years, the question has been, are they going to win the Super Bowl? This year, it's, are they going to be any good? They have 2 first-year tight ends. They have a bunch of young receivers, a new starting quarterback. Like, it's just interesting. And there's way more storylines. And Jordan Love's a nice guy, it seems, but he hasn't really come out of his shell yet. But I think just the storyline of, can the Packers do it again and find another, you know, long-term starting quarterback, not even a Hall of Famer, but a long-term starting quarterback, is enough intrigue for me to be like, okay, let's go. Let's make things interesting around here.
Yeah. What are the fair expectations for Jordan Love? Like, so let's say he's not bad. Like, let's say he turned, I still, and I've made this point many times on this show, like, I feel like if they were totally in love with their pick after 1 year, things would have played out differently the last few years. But it's possible that he's developed. He was under Aaron Rodgers. We've been seeing on Hard Knocks how he's, you know, dealing with Zach Wilson, and it's super interesting. And so let's say he's gotten better, but still, like, what's the ceiling there? And is there a scenario where that almost like makes things tougher on the Packers? Like, if he's just sort of okay, right? Like, would it almost be better if he's just like bad and they can figure that out, and then all of a sudden they're in the Caleb Williams conversation?
I'm sure they would love Caleb Williams, but I don't think they're going to be that bad. Listen, Aaron has said multiple times that he thinks the Packers intended to move on from him I think he said after 1 or 2 years after they drafted Jordan Love, but him winning back-to-back MVPs threw a wrench in it because you can't trade an MVP or a back-to-back MVP, no matter what your initial timeline to move on from him was. Now, the Packers didn't exercise Jordan Love's 5th-year option, so they don't have to guarantee him around $20 million next season, because what if he stinks this season? Then you're on the hook for that. So they extended him for 1 year instead, guaranteeing him, I believe it was about $13 million that was reported up front for this year, but they're just on the hook for less in the long term. So he gets a nice, bonus, incentive, whatever you want to call it, to play well this year. And it's kind of a 2-year trial period. So they're going to find out probably about 8 games into this season whether he's up for it or not. And guess what? It may take longer than that, but we're in the business of making snap decisions, and the Packers probably can't afford to wait, 3 years to figure out if he's the guy. Hold on. I just got a text about a guy getting cut. Let me tweet this. It's not a big one, but
Matt Schefter here right in the middle of the podcast. This is big.
Not really. I don't know if this one will move the needle.
Oh, man. Now my eyes are glued to Twitter. I want to know who this is.
Yep, let's pull it up.
Don't worry about
it. I want to worry about it. It's cut down day.
But back to my answer. I think Jordan Love would have been the starter here a couple years ago if Aaron hadn't won back-to-back MVPs. But he's here, and it could take a little while. Everyone's going to be impatient because they want to know right now. It's already been 3 years. If he's not ready now, when is he going to be ready? But I remember talking to Brian Gutekunst earlier this offseason for a story I did on kind of the breakup between Rodgers and the Packers, and I asked him specifically about Jordan Love, not about, the Rodgers stuff. And he said, you won't really know till you're thrown in the fire. Aaron said the same thing when I asked him earlier this offseason about Jordan. He was like, I remember when I got 50 texts in the summer of 2008. I woke up in Southern California and people told me Brett was finally gone. And I didn't know if I could handle all this until I was thrown into the fire. So it's a cop-out answer, but who knows how long it's going to take for the Packers to get a firm grasp on who this kid is. Maybe it's just week 1. Maybe he goes out there, throws 6 touchdowns against the Bears, and they just extend him right there.
Oh, that would go over well here.
Well, that would. I'm not sure Chicago would exist anymore. If
that would not go well. That'd be like worse than the 2019 opener.
I'm just doing the day trip. Driving down morning of, driving back after the game. And regardless of what happens, specifically if the Packers win, since we'll be in the Chicago area, I just can't wait for, Sports Talk Radio. As a member of Sports Talk Radio myself now, I cannot wait for how lit up either of these cities' airwaves are, depending on what happens.
All right. So beyond Jordan Love, you mentioned getting to cover like all these other storylines. And this is new for us too. We always bring up the quarterbacks on this podcast with you. So what else is going on with the Packers? Take us through it all.
Yeah, there are a couple intriguing things. And I'm going to start with maybe the thing that people find the least amount of interest in is special teams. So they signed Rich Bisaccia.
No, you just made Adam Hoge's day, but go on.
So Rich Bisaccia comes over after he doesn't get the full-time job with the Raiders. And I'm guessing he's the highest paid special teams coordinator in the league. I don't know that. That's just a guess. But the Packers special teams had been absolutely horrific. It was right after they had that blocked punt in the divisional round against the 49ers. They had 10 guys on the field to defend Robbie Gould's game-winning field goal. They were like, all right, we need to start taking special teams seriously. Rich Bisaccia brings in Dallin Levitt, his core special teamer from the Raiders, Keyshawn Nixon, who is the first-team All-Pro kick returner last year, and a bunch of guys who play special teams but can also play defense instead of guys that, it's a linebacker, let's just throw him on special teams. So Mason Crosby had been the Packers kicker for the last 16 years. Kicked well last year. He went 25 for 29. Lost a little bit of juice in his leg in terms of long kicks and, long field goals and kickoffs, but, still accurate. And then Pat O'Donnell, who you guys know well, punted well, reliable holder in these conditions, good directional punter. Now they have a kicker and punter who have never played in an NFL game, either of them. So Rich Bisaccia is going to earn his money. Anders Carlson, a 24, 25-year-old rookie out of Auburn, who's the younger brother of Daniel Carlson from the Raiders, who made first-team All-Pro last year. The kid is wildly up and down. Like, he'll have one amazing day when you go like, oh, this kid could be the best kicker in the league. He has an unbelievable leg, hit from 57 in the game the other day with ease. But then the next day he'll miss 4 kicks and a PAT. Like, that's a worry going into the season. And then at punter, they released O'Donnell yesterday, which was a surprise to me. And they're going with Daniel Whelan, who is an XFL punter who hasn't even been punting that long. He's an Irish guy, has an absolute cannon, but, struggles kind of directionally, which is what Pat was good at. On defense, it's the same thing. They have pretty much the same guys, 8 first-round picks now instead of 7. But the big difference is Rashawn Gary is healthy. One of my most telling stats from last season was the Packers ranked second in pressure percentage the first 9 games of the season behind the Cowboys. Percentage of pass rush snaps resulting in a pressure. Second half of the season, after Gary tore his ACL in week 9, they ranked 28th. So a drop off of 26 spots. On offense, I have no idea what to expect. The offensive line's the same, can be really good, a top 3 unit. They have one of the best running back tandems in Jones and Dillon, but they're so new and inexperienced at wide receiver, tight end with 2 rookies in Jordan Love, that it's one of the most intriguing storylines in the NFL. Like, what are the Packers going to be on offense?
We asked this to Alec, and I'm curious for your thoughts. For someone who's covering a quarterback change, and we're used to quarterback changes here in Chicago, what do you think of the Bears? Like, how do you see the NFC North playing out? Do you think it's as wide open as we do? So, like, you're up in Green Bay. You know what they talk about. Like, how does everyone view the Bears? Well, how do you and maybe even the Packers view the Bears right now?
Well, I think how I view the Bears is different than how Packer fans view the Bears because they just think they're the worst franchise of all time. Listen, I think the Bears on paper, which only means so much, are probably still the weakest team in the division, but they definitely closed the gap this offseason. And listen, with DJ Moore, I think that could surprise some people, kind of injecting some life into this offense. And, if Justin Fields takes that next jump, I think the Bears could be right in the mix. I think this is the second weakest division in football. Well, the NFC West isn't very good this year, and the Cardinals are like a JV team, but
South's pretty bad too.
I think the AFC South and the NFC North. Well, yeah, the NFC South. There's a lot of bad divisions in football, is what
basically
I'm saying.
The whole NFC.
It's like, yeah, pretty much. I don't think it's a particularly strong division, just taking it by itself. And I think the Vikings are probably still the best roster with the Packers second. I'm not buying all the Lions hype of, okay, they finished last season on a strong winning streak. Now they're going to win the division. Like, the Vikings are probably going to come back down to earth after all those 1-score wins. The Packers are probably somewhere in the middle. Although I think they don't play a team that made the playoffs last year till week 8. So it's a favorable schedule. The Lions are probably right around where they finished last year. And then the Bears are on the up, I think, which is not hard to do when you're the worst team in the league. So I still think the Bears are probably the weakest team in the division, but I could very well be wrong.
Well, the Bears are 1.5 point favorites still in week 1. Although I think it was 2.5. And so it is coming back to the middle a little bit, but yeah, they're favored technically against the Packers, at least as of right now.
I did not know that.
Do you have a pick for the North yet? Or are you leaning one way or the other?
Yeah, I picked the Vikings earlier in the offseason, and I'll stick with that. I think I've said all along, I think the Packers go 10-7. I think Jordan Love's going to be above average, not a world beater, but I think the Packers have enough around him specifically. And I know this is a huge if the offensive line stays healthy. The last time David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins were healthy together, consistently playing well, they were both Pro Bowl starters in 2020. They are both healthy and playing well together again. Well, I don't know if David Bakhtiari is playing well. He hasn't played in the preseason, but I'll go Vikings, Packers, Lions, Bears.
Interesting. Lions third. All right. Matt, we appreciate it. Great stuff as always. And
he's off the hook for next week. Can't have him back-to-back weeks. He's a busy man.
Well, we We could, but yeah, we probably
Wait.
shouldn't. We should.
I have time for Hoge
The guy-
Jahns
the-
any day of the week.
This guy's out here
Well,
breaking.
now he's booked. We did it.
No, we did it. But he's out here breaking Gene DeLance news in the middle of our podcast while he's on with us. This is what Matt Schneidman brings you. Former Bear, by the way, that probably no one remembers. Gene DeLance waived by the Packers.
Would he count on the immaculate grid, or did he not play a snap for the Bears?
I don't think he would count. No, he never played a
think he
snap.
did.
I think he got cut before. I think he was like final cuts
Got it.
last year. So, Matt,
Well.
thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, we covered the Vikings. We covered the Packers. We now go east to Detroit. Colton Pouncy, who covers the Lions, the future Super Bowl champion, Detroit Lions. If you believe the hype. What's up, Colton?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, Lions fans have definitely talked themselves into that already, so not wrong there.
Well, how's the are you buying the hype? Like, how is the team handling the hype about, everybody likes the Lions this year, man.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing a good job internally handling expectations. At the end of the day, they're like,
Sorry.
we didn't make the playoffs last year. They're good. Like, we didn't make the playoffs last year. We went 9-8. We started off 1-6. That wasn't good enough. So we understand that while the hype is nice, we still have, to put in the work to get to where we want to go. For me, I'm looking at the team, and even when they were 1-6, my whole thought process was, all right, this is a rebuild, right? It's going to take some time to kind of get these young players in here that they drafted. Going to take time for those guys to develop. Had some unfortunate injuries last year. So when they win their second half run, it wasn't really, it was a bit of a surprise. They went 8-2, but I thought the wins would eventually come just because those young dudes were finally kind of getting their feet wet in the league. Like Aiden Hutchinson, Kirby Joseph, the safety, James Houston, Malcolm Rodriguez, some of these players that they drafted last year were finally starting to break through in the second half. So in terms of the way they finished, I think that's sort of the progress that you wanted to see. And what they did this offseason with, some rookies that they brought in, Jack Campbell, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, what they did in free agency with some of the pieces in the secondary, which was probably their biggest weakness defensively. I'm looking at the team now. I'm saying, all right, based on what you did last year, the new pieces you have coming in, I can see why there's some hype about the team and why people think that they can win the NFC North.
Yeah, I get it, and I like what overall I liked what they were doing last year. I like, other than maybe using a first round pick on a running back, I like.
I like the old school draft though a little bit.
It's and
running backs and linebackers, man.
And Dan Campbell is old school, so it's fun, it's entertaining. I get all that, and they did fill some pieces on defense. I just still, you look at the roster as a whole, and it's like, come on, they're not quite there yet. To actually win a Super Bowl. And I got to be honest, if we're going to put so much stock in the end of the season and that nice run they went on, Colton, why is everybody ignoring that game in Carolina? Right?
Yeah,
doesn't that still count?
Lions fans still have nightmares about that. Like, I think they rushed for 320 yards, which was just insane. That's a spot that you're kind of looking at. If you are looking for reasons for, pessimism, which a lot of people aren't doing right now here in Detroit, like that would be one. The rushing defense. But, maybe that's why they brought in a guy like Jack Campbell. He's pretty good against the run. The guy, third round pick, Roderick Martin, who's like a big nose tackle. He's like 6'5", 330. He'll probably be a reserve guy at start. Maybe he can help fill some of those issues with the gaps. But yeah, a lot of it, you just have to see it, right? Like there are reasons for optimism, but they have to go out and prove it. And they do have a young team still. So if they are going to maybe, break through, those guys have to be ready. And if they're not, I could see this being another, 9-8 season.
Where is David Montgomery maybe fitting in? We've talked a lot about the Bears' run game here being a strength again, and David Montgomery is not here. And it was as we just mentioned, the Lions drafted a running back with their first pick. So how's that run game sorting out for the Lions?
Yeah, I think there's room in this offense for, two really effective running backs. And I look at Gibbs and Montgomery as players that really complement each other well. In my mind, I kind of view it as Gibbs is sort of the Swift upgrade, replacement, however you want to call it. Swift was entering the last year of his rookie deal, couldn't really rely on him to stay healthy. Gibbs is a younger, faster version of him, and he can still do all the same things in the passing game. And I look at Montgomery as an upgrade over Jamal Williams. A lot of people like to look at Jamal Williams' 17 rushing touchdowns, but I believe 13 of those came like inside the 2. So it was really, to me, more of a product of the Lions offense, just getting down the field and just giving him the ball there rather than, Jamal being this sort of dynamic player. He's really good number 2 back, but he's not really a lead dynamic player like that. So Montgomery, I'm not saying he's the top back in the league, but I think he has more ability than Jamal Williams. I think he can, break tackles in the second level, can do some stuff in the passing game for you. And he's a younger version of Jamal. So I think that was sort of the idea. They have this offensive line that they've invested a lot of first round picks in, a lot of money in. They want to get the most out of that unit while they have those guys in place. So, the Lions run the ball a ton. That's sort of their bread and butter. So having 2 backs like that is, sort of what they wanted in place.
Lions have certainly seemingly found something here with Ben Johnson and Jared Goff. What's the long-term view on Jared Goff in Detroit? Like, what's the plan here? And is there any thought in the back of anyone's mind there in Detroit right now that if this thing does go off the rails and it's, unexpectedly not a great year or they regress, is it because of the quarterback? Because I thought Jared Goff was great last year, but I can't help but have in the back of my mind, well, is he really gonna repeat it? Is he gonna be able to do it again and repeat those same numbers?
Yeah, Brad Holmes said that he never viewed Jared Goff as sort of a bridge quarterback. He drafted him. He's part of a team that drafted him in LA, traded for him, and he's a guy that he actually believes in, contrary to popular belief. But Goff, I still think he has some things to prove. He bounced back last year in a great way, made a Pro Bowl, passed for 4,000 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. It was a great year. But there are some questions, how much of that was Ben Johnson? What happens if Ben Johnson leaves and gets a head coaching gig? Can you kind of continue that success without Johnson in place? And, that's a question I think we're still figuring out. I like Goff. I think he's a good quarterback for a team like this that just hasn't won a playoff game in 30 plus years. Just having a guy like that who's been around, been in Super Bowl, that can help you, especially for a young team. Now, you might have questions later on whether he can be that guy that can actually win one. But for now, I think they're in a really good place with him. So that's probably a question for the future. But they do draft Hendon Hooker. In the 3rd round, I think the injury kind of bumped him down a little bit. He probably would have been drafted a little bit higher. Maybe he's the quarterback of the future. We still don't really know because he hasn't even practiced yet. But in terms of Goff, I don't know. Maybe they go a short-term deal. They've, Brad Holmes said that internally they've kind of addressed, had conversations about contract extensions, but nothing that's been presented to Goff yet. So maybe they try to work out a short-term deal that gives them a chance to kind of, continue evaluating him while giving him some money. So, we'll see what the future looks like with Goff, but right now they're in a good place.
I want to ask you about the defense. You have Aiden Hutchinson. You just drafted Jack Campbell. The Lions just drafted Jack Campbell. But let's start with this. What does John Fox exactly do for the Lions on defense?
I'm not exactly sure.
Only partially kidding.
Yeah.
Old friend John Fox, friend of the show, John Fox.
It's so funny because in training camp, I'll look around and be like, oh yeah, John Fox is here. But no, he's involved, and they brought him in here for a reason. They trust his mind, and he's still active and running around out there. So that's good for them. But yeah, they've got this defense, man, that they're trying to get going in the right direction. They finished, close to the bottom of the league in yards and points allowed last year. That's been a constant theme so far in the Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn era. And for me, looking at it, it was sort of they never had the pieces to do what they want to do. The key to Aaron Glenn's defense is really the secondary, and they just haven't had, again, the pieces. Like Jeff Okudah drafted him. The previous regime drafted him. He wasn't really an Aaron Glenn type of cornerback. Some of the other pieces in the secondary either banged up or no longer on the team, honestly. So they really revamped that position this offseason. Brought in CJ Gardner-Johnson, drafted Brian Branch, who's probably going to start at nickel for this team, in week 1 against the Chiefs. Cam Sutton on the outside at cornerback. So they've made some moves here to kind of address that position and kind of get the defense on track. But again, it's one of those things that you kind of have to see it before you start believing it.
Johns, I think we know exactly what John Fox is doing in Detroit.
I'm not an offense coordinator. I'm not a defense coordinator. I'm not a special teams coordinator, but I coordinate all 3.
He's doing everything.
A little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit of everything. All right. So where are you, Colton, I guess, on, I don't know if you've made a record prediction or what you think the ceiling, maybe give us a best case and worst case scenario for this Detroit Lions team based on what you've seen throughout the preseason.
Yeah, best case is that the offense doesn't really regress, that the pieces they brought in help them, continue on their trajectory as a top 5 scoring offense. The young guys are more dynamic, like Sam Laporta. I think he's going to come in and, really help them as a tight end. I know with rookie tight ends, you never know, but he's looked really sharp. Jahmyr Gibbs looks pretty good out there. And Montgomery looks good. So best case scenario, the offense, continues humming here. The defense figures some things out. Maybe they get to, middle of the pack instead of, bottom of the league. And that's a playoff team, in my opinion. I think I had them at, I want to say 11-6. That would be a two-win improvement, 2-game improvement there. I don't think that's too drastic. A lot of people had them at Lions fans are talking themselves into 13-4. I don't really see that, but I guess that you could call that a best case scenario in their mind. But I'm a little bit more pessimistic there. But yeah, I think 11-6 is probably realistic.
We had
and worst case scenario.
Yeah, go ahead.
Defense still looks like the defense of last year. The rookies aren't ready to go, and you probably take a step back. Maybe you go 8-9 or 9-8 again.
We had Alec Lewis and Matt Schneidman on the show earlier, and we had this question for him. You're covering everything Lions. We're covering everything Bears here. How do you, as the Lions expert, how do you view the Bears? How do, not forget the fans, but maybe how do the Lions themselves as a franchise, how do they view where the Bears at? What would concern the Lions about the Bears?
Justin Fields certainly, this defense has not been able to handle, mobile quarterbacks at all. We saw that last year in some of those games. So just having him in place probably strikes fear into the Lions. In terms of how I view the Bears, I think they'll be, much improved. I like some of the moves they made. I like their draft a lot. So if they can, double their win total there, get to 6-7 wins, I think that's a solid improvement, whether Bears fans like that or not. I think that's, that's sort of the progress you want to see. That's what I thought the Lions would be last year, going from 3-13-1 to a 6-7 win team. That's a step in the right direction, but they end up doing a little bit more. So maybe the Bears can do the same thing. Some of these pieces come along, and the NFC North is kind of there for the taking. There's really no king of this division right now, so it's wide open. If the Bears show improvement, they can be a little bit more competitive than people think, I think.
So are the Lions your pick to win the North?
They are, but I have it being very close. I think I had the Lions at 11-6, Vikings at 10-7, Packers at either 8-9 or 9-8, and then kind of the Bears right there.
All right. Was that a clean
Again,
sweep?
wide open.
Johns did it. Oh, no. Matt went with the Vikings. Okay.
Yeah, Matt went with
So Alec had Lions. Colton has the Lions. Matt went with the Vikings.
Interesting.
So there you go. I think it's going to be a fun division. I do. I mean, there's not going to be any runaway teams, but it's going to be – I think a lot of these NFC North games are going to be a lot of fun to watch this year and be nail biters. So, Colton, we appreciate you jumping on with us today. Really appreciate it, and hope everybody is already following you. If not, they should be at Colton_Pouncy to get the coverage from the Detroit Lions within the division all season long. Thanks, Colton.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Colton.
All right, Johns. Any takeaways? It seems like everyone thinks the Bears will be better, but no one's going hey, surprise, surprise, the Bears are really in the mix to win the division.
Well, I think everybody, at least that we had on the show, would confirm at least our feelings that it could be wide open. I don't think you or I are picking the Bears to win the division. I think they'll compete better in the division as opposed to last year, and that's just more than Aaron Rodgers leaving it. I think they've improved their roster to a point where they will be in more games just overall. Playoff berth, I don't know, but they'll compete with their division rivals. I think we can all agree on that. I think we heard Matt, Alec, and Colton all say that as well.
I just have this sneaky suspicion that, and maybe it's just because the West doesn't look that good and the South looks pretty bad. But I think a few months into this season, we're going to actually be looking at the NFC North as a pretty competitive division. Because I think the floor with the Vikings is still relatively high. There's just too much talent on that offense. You got Justin Jefferson running around. You got something good. And same thing with the Lions. Like they're just, I think they're too well coached on the offensive side of the ball. So like there's going to be some fun games. If I had to pick a team that might have the lowest floor, I think I would pick the Packers, actually. Like
because of the more unknowns with the quarterback.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Matt said, which is you got all these young rookies or second-year wide receivers, right? You have a rookie tight end. The kicking game looks like a mess right now. And maybe they'll figure it out, but it's very concerning. And I just don't know how long that defense is going to be able to. Like if Jordan Love is not good, that's the one team that I could see bottom out. I just think the floor is too high with the Lions and the Vikings, and I don't know. You look at the schedule and the Bears. It would be very, very surprising if they're in the 3-4 win range again. It just would be.
Yeah, it would be. Well, then there's a whole load of different questions that will come after that. And this podcast isn't ready to go down that road right now. I think the surprising thing would be if one of the teams in the NFC North runs away with it. Whatever team it is, like flat out runs away with it. 13, 14 wins, like clear champion, clearly better than everybody else within the division. One of the top teams in the NFC North. That would surprise me. Maybe there's some fluky things where it happens like the Vikings did, but I don't think anybody viewed the Lions as one of the top teams like in the league last year. Good team, but not one of the top teams. So that would surprise me if there's like a runaway winner within this division.
Yeah. All right, well, that was fun. Kind of catch up on. We spent so much time zeroed in on the Bears during training camp that you get to this point where you got a week and a half till the season starts. You want to zoom back out and catch up on everything else that's going on around the league, especially within the NFC North. So hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode, and make sure you're following all of those writers throughout the season. Alec Lewis, Matt Schneidman, Colton Pouncy, really appreciate them and their coverage, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from all of them again. Matt will be on again. I don't know if it'll be next week, or maybe it will, but
could be.
Matt's always
we
here.
technically did book him during the show again for the repeat visit. So
we did. So yeah, it's Bears-Packers week already next week. Crazy. All right. Well, while everybody enjoys this, I'm sure cut downs are happening and maybe a trade or two as well. So, again, reminder, 53-man roster today, Tuesday, as we record this. Then you go through 24 hours of waivers. Things change, more trades, whatever. I think by Thursday morning when we reconvene, we'll have a better idea of what that real 53-man roster looks like when the dust settles. So we will be back Thursday to break all of that down with you. And I think we're going to go live Thursday too, since we didn't do that for this Tuesday episode. So you have that to look forward to. Follow us on Twitter at Adam Hoge, at Adam Jahns. All the merch is up on obviousshirts.com. And we appreciate everybody that's been buying our new stuff, new polls.